Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Michelle Ragland and I'm the Associate Director of Commission Affairs here at ACCSC. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. So you'll notice that all attendees are in listen-only mode. So if you have any questions, please use the Q&A button in the webinar platform. Tasha Johnson, one of our accreditation coordinators, and I will be monitoring those, and we'll have them ready for our presenters as well. This webinar will be recorded and will be available on our website within the next few days. If you're attending live, you will receive documentation of your attendance following the webinar. And for those of you watching, you'll be able to download, or watching the recording, you'll be able to download a certificate on our website. And some other items to keep in mind, we are looking for individuals who are interested in becoming a commissioner. You can learn more at accsc.org and submit your nomination by November 13th. And also, we hope to see all of you at the Professional Development Conference coming up this September in San Antonio, where we'll be celebrating 20 years of our conference and community and collaboration. So please visit accsc.org/events to learn more and to register. And now it is my pleasure to introduce you to our speakers for today's webinar, Put Your Best Foot Forward, Preparing for the On-Site Evaluation. We are joined by Maria Sirokis, our Associate Director of Institutional Accreditation, and Amaya Bullock, our Manager of Accreditation, who together have conducted close to 500 on-site evaluations. So I think they know a thing or two. We'll also end our afternoon together with some updates from our Executive Director regarding the accreditation alert from July 1st. So now, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Maria and Amaya.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
And thank you all for joining us today. Before we get started, I just want to identify that we are going to be presenting about how to prepare for on-site evaluations as it relates to renewal of accreditation on-site evaluations and those required for initial accreditation applications as well. However, many of the best practices we're going to discuss here are still relevant for those visits that happen as a result of approved substantive change applications. When preparing for a substantive change application, you will receive a list of documents to have prepared and ready for the team review ahead of that. And so much of that will be covered through our discussion of renewal and initial on-site evaluations. All right. So when preparing for an on-site evaluation, that is a requirement of renewal of accreditation applications and initial accreditation applications. But what came before the actual on-site evaluation experience begins? Well, the school is going through the renewal or initial accreditation process by attending a workshop, and then after attending the workshop, submitting their applications for either initial or renewal accreditation and populating and putting together a detailed and well-organized self-evaluation report. It is a best practice and something that Amaya and I regularly work with schools on to involve the entire school in populating the application and the self-evaluation report. Preparing for the on-site evaluation does not start when you're preparing for the on-site evaluation. It starts when you are putting together the materials that will serve as those visit materials during the visit. So in terms of a timeline for initial and renewal accreditation, school representatives who have the ability to make changes at their institution, such as the campus director or other senior leadership, will attend the workshop. Those applications are then due for renewals within 45 days of the workshop and for initial applicants within 6 months of that workshop. Once those have been acknowledged or accepted, the schools must then submit the self-evaluation report, and for initials that would also accompany a Part 2 application. For initial accreditation applicants, the staff will review those materials, conduct an orientation on-site evaluation, conduct an orientation evaluation, largely virtual, and then provide their feedback to the schools so they have the opportunity to revise those materials. And then those revised materials become the on-site evaluation materials that are made accessible to the teams that will participate in that review. For renewal applicants, once we get the self-evaluation report, the school is then in the pipeline to receive an on-site evaluation. Once the on-site evaluation experience is complete, the team will put together the on-site evaluation report, what we call the OER. The report will be sent to the school and the school has the opportunity to respond. It is that report and the school's response that come together to create the file that is then submitted or reviewed at the commission's quarterly commission meetings. So the purpose of the on-site evaluation is actually threefold. One, it is the team's opportunity to verify that the information that is provided in the application or applications and the self-evaluation report is sufficiently reflective of the school's actual practices on site. It is also the commission's opportunity to develop an understanding through the assessment of the team of whether the school is meeting its own objectives and to determine the extent to which the school complies with accrediting standards in the execution of those objectives. And now I'd like to hand it off to Amaya to talk through the review materials.
So as Maria touched on, the first step to preparing for an on-site evaluation is to review the materials that you've already prepared. And so some of those materials are the self-evaluation report and initial application or renewal application for accreditation, student files, student achievement data, so that graduation and employment supporting documentation, requested materials on site, reports, any reports, so like ongoing outcomes reports, et cetera, and your faculty and personnel reports. So some of those things you haven't prepared already, but you maintain as part of your normal accreditation cycle. So digging into some of those visit materials a little bit more, additional materials would be your Appendix B. That's available online on the ACCSC website. There's a two separate lists for initial and renewal schools, your self-evaluation report again, any substantive changes that your school might be in the application process of, so like a change of control, a change of location, a new master's degree program, et cetera. That Appendix A is for the occupation specialist, but it's also for your education specialist, so it's for the team as well, and any reporting and closure. So you'll know if this applies to your school because any official correspondence that you have with us, so any school action letter, those reporting enclosures will be in there. Those institutional enhancement enclosures, the team looks at all of that from the previous renewal cycle because it was directed by the commission to verify that you're maintaining those specific standards. So that's all part of that review for the school, and also the visiting team reviews all the materials in preparation for the on-site evaluation. So again, like the reporting enclosures, I feel like that's one thing that's usually missed, and that could be program advisory committee reporting. It could be student satisfaction reports that were requested by the commission for you to prepare for the team. You don't want it to be a surprise day one and the team doesn't have those materials to review. One aspect of the on-site evaluation are interviews and surveys. So that's part of the team materials. We survey 25% of the student population overall, but then also we ensure that we survey 25% of each program. And that might also look like we're hopping into some classrooms versus you might see team members speaking to students, speaking to your faculty. So that's part of the team room materials. I would say one big thing that you can do for preparing for the on-site evaluation is utilize the ACCSC resources that we have. So every July 1 of every calendar year, we publish updated standards of accreditation. We look at your internal policies and procedures, so that's something you can look at on an ongoing basis. As part of that, also your institutional assessment and implementation activities, and ensuring that when we're coming to your campus, if you're a multi-campus institution, that specific campus is prepared for the team to talk to your staff one-on-one. We're not really going to rely on your compliance support staff for those interviews. We really want to talk to the people, the faculty, instructors, staff that are there on site on a day-to-day basis.
If I may add, one of the best practices for schools that go through this process very well is they actually practice interviews. But the interviews are really meant to verify that policies and procedures are consistently adhered to throughout the process. So I will give you kind of an example, and I share this with renewal workshop participants every quarter when we do them. You can expect a team leader to go to the campus director and say, okay, from lead to enrolled student, take me through that process, your admissions and enrollment processes. And they'll write it down and they'll say, okay, thank you. If I have any other questions, can we set up another time for a follow-up? Yes. Okay. Then they'll go to your director of admissions or your enrollment manager, whoever serves in that function at your campus. And they'll say, okay, so from lead generation to enrolled student, please take me through that process. And if I have any follow-up questions, can we reconvene later? Yes. And then they may go to an admissions representative and say, okay, from lead to enrolled student, what is the process for admissions? And then they will take the results of those 3 interview experiences back to the team room. And if there are any discrepancies, they're going to go back into your SER, into the policies and procedures that were provided for the team, and try and identify where some of those discrepancies or a potential breakdown may be, and then tailor some questions back up to the campus president or the senior staff responsible for the operations of that campus, and try and determine, if the school is following their established policies and procedures, and if those policies and procedures and practices, if they do not align, do align with accrediting standards. So that is an option that you have in terms of preparing your staff for interviews, is do those consistency exercises with those practice interview experiences.
Yeah, Mari, I think you touched on a big part of communicating with your campus and preparing them for the team to actually to interact with the on-site evaluation team. So continuing on with utilizing some of the resources that we have, we do have some resources online that are free, and paid opportunities. This webinar is one version of just one tool that you can use in order to prepare for an on-site evaluation. We have our CAP program, the online training center. This is all on the website, blueprints, monographs. But then the most important one is ACCSC staff. Once you have an on-site evaluation, scheduled, you have a commission representative that's your point person for your visit. So anytime you have a question, if they're small or large, that ACCSC staff member is specifically there to answer those questions for you. We prefer over communication over no communication. So just don't hesitate to reach out to your commission representative that will be there on site to support the on-site evaluation team, but also you through that visit. And then my next tip would be, don't hoard that information for the people that are attending here. Share that information with your campus, again, like that communication. Your campus should be, again, prepared to meet with a team leader and education specialist, maybe a commission representative if they're career services, without leadership present. Amaria touched on those in-house trainings with staff and faculty. I think at a base level, just explaining the purpose of the on-site evaluation and set expectations as to how long we'll be there, letting them know that we'll be there is the first step, and letting them know that we will be talking to them, and that this is, if it's for a renewal or initial, it's just part of the normal process of your reaccreditation or initial accreditation process. It's really nothing to be spooked about. And your team should be familiar with the standards at the very least that are specific to their roles, not just compliance personnel. So faculty members should be aware of what was written in the self-evaluation report and should at least have glanced or read through the faculty qualifications for it from the standards of accreditation. Same with admission staff. I know that they sign a code of conduct, but they should read through our admission standards just to get a sense of why we're asking specific questions. Our team leader and education specialists have evaluation reports that they have to fill out that are all designed to follow the standards of accreditation. So preparing your team for those sorts of conversations.
I will also add that we advise that schools, as I mentioned earlier in this presentation, we advise that schools have a collaborative approach to compiling and assembling the self-evaluation report. We also understand, that some structures find value in creating specific initiatives for compliance and centralizing some of those locations, especially centralizing some of those responsibilities, especially for, multi-campus operations. But I will say that if you didn't take our advice and make the SER collaborative, at the very least, do what Amaya suggests, which is make sure that this campus-based staff that are participating in this visit are familiar with what is in those materials, because it is very clear and we are quick to identify when those visit materials are not reflective of what is actually happening on campus, but they are more, in some cases, just a little off, in other cases, wholly aspirational. And so please be mindful of, how the SER and the application materials are presenting the school, and make sure there's alignment with what is actually happening on campus, and those responsible for the day-to-day operations of the school are familiar with what is in that documentation as well.
And so we've talked about the team and the on-site evaluation team a lot. So at the very least, you'll have one team leader, one education specialist, a commission representative, and occupation specialist. So I'll just talk about the role of each team member first. The team leader will always be associated with an ACCSC member school. Their review focuses mainly on administration and management. The education specialist may not be associated with an ACCSC member school, but they will have a background in academics, and they will interview your faculty, your educational administration. Sometimes your students, they'll work with the occupation specialist as well, and their review focuses on curriculum, distance education, et cetera. The commission representative will be an ACCSC staff member, and their main role is really to we're in the background. We stay in the room a lot, and we talk about student achievement. So, and we review the student achievement supporting documentation. So we will be talking to most likely your career services member, but for the most part, we're there to support the team. I like to refer to myself as an administrative assistant to the entire team. So if you don't see us a lot, that's not necessarily a negative. And the amount of each evaluator depends on the makeup of your school. So if you have a specific number of programs, you might require 2 education specialists. If you have a population of over 500 students, you will require at least 2 commission representatives. And occupation specialist depends on the number and group of related programs you have at your campus. And so if we want to, let's talk about occupation specialists a little bit more. So in preparation for the on-site evaluation, and also this is required when you submit your self-evaluation report, review that Appendix A that has the qualifications for an occupation specialist. These are just redacted 3 of the points, which is they cannot be affiliated with the school in any way. Meaning they cannot be a former or current PAC member. They cannot be the niece of your career services representative. They cannot be a former employee. has no conflict of interest with the school, and has at least 5 years of experience in the field and current licensure where required for employment. In addition to that, if it's a degree level program, they have to have at least earned a degree that they're of the program that they're reviewing. And so those are just the qualifications for making the list of occupation specialists, 3 per program area. When they're actually on site, that's another topic to prepare your team for. So the occupation specialist doesn't stay secluded to their room with the ACCSC team. They are going to, for the most part, be communicating and interacting with you all. So you want to identify a lead instructor, or it sometimes could be the dean. It depends, but you want to identify someone at your school who will be giving the occupation specialist a tour of the specific facilities they'll be looking at. They won't take a full tour of the school. If they're there to review the nursing program, they're only going to look at the nursing area, and they're not going to look at what the IT students require. And so the occupation specialist review typically takes about 2 hours. It depends on how many programs they're reviewing, but it begins with a orientation with the ACCSC team, which takes about 15 to 20 minutes. And then we hand them off to you all, and they're off with you all for an hour or hour and a half or so. And they come back to us and complete the evaluation form that we give them. So you really have to be prepared to host them as well.
Yeah, and generally speaking, when we do the orientation for occupation specialists, one of the biggest questions we're asking them to answer is, would you hire graduates from this program? Right? So as you're preparing your staff, the lead faculty or the program head or the director of education, whoever's going to be the point person for those program matter specialists, let them know that is what the occupation specialist is there to review. Is it a quality program that meets the objectives, that aligns with the trends in the field, prepares them for licensure, and would they hire those graduates?
And so I want to take a moment to talk about a few different types of materials that the team looks at on site. One being the student achievement documentation that is supporting your graduation and employment charts. So which annual reporting period will the team review? Well, it depends. They will always review the most recently submitted annual report data. And this might be different than the data that was corresponding with the third-party verification. So if we come anytime after the 2026, the July 2026 annual report period, we might be looking at 2025 and 2026 because your third party corresponds to 2025, but you just submitted your July 2026 annual report. How should the school organize the supporting documentation? Always refer back to Appendix B. It's the very last item of Appendix B. It's the longest item in Appendix B too. And so first and foremost, the documentation should correspond with the G&E chart, which is organized by program, then cohort start date. And again, if you have specific questions leading up to the on-site evaluation, reach out to your commission representative because it might be something specific to your institution that doesn't apply normally to any other school. And so some brief do's and don'ts is do not organize the student achievement documentation alphabetically because typically then the commission representative cannot review what you have in your student achievement documentation to your G&E chart because the cohorts are mixed in. Sometimes the programs can be mixed in, and also don't in your actual documentation relying solely on your third-party verifier, whomever that is, that's not an appropriate step. That's not an appropriate policy for student achievement documentation. We require that you maintain internal records that then might be verified with a third-party company. Your documentation should identify the graduate via the list prepared in the employment verification documentation. And that's a long way of saying if on your employment verification documentation, you only have the student name, but on the student list, you provide us only the student number, there's no way for us to match up those corresponding lists. So just ensure that that on both of the documents that we have identifying information, either the student number or the student name, that we can use that going through the documentation. Include documentation for furthering education and unavailable for graduate and employment. I'd say that's a typical, that's usually something that some schools forget, is not including that actual documentation. They have the list, but they don't have, for example, for furthering education, they don't have the students' enrollment agreement for their new program, the acceptance letter for the new program that they're in. And then I would also add to that, making sure that you have the supporting documentation for licensure rates. We look at all of that as well. And then one big tip is just include a printout of each graduation and employment chart. Almost every commission representative will ask you to print it out. So if you could do that preemptively, you'll probably save yourself a little time.
And when we are reviewing the backup documentation for the chart is in two sections, right? There's the graduation section of the chart, which is at the top, and the employment section down at the bottom. When we are reviewing the records, we are verifying every data point for every cohort start date. So what that realistically looks like is if you have 3 enrollments per year, we are going to be looking at those 3 columns where you list those starts. And in the first column, we're going to ask for transcripts of every student that is classified as a graduate. We are then going to open your catalog and look at your graduation requirements. And we're going to review every transcript to make sure that those who are classified as graduates actually met all of the graduation requirements as listed in the catalog. Now, if you have credit hour programs, we're going to make sure that the students earned the minimum number of credits to graduate. If it's clock hour, we are going to make sure that they completed all clock hours and thereby finish the program. Then we're going to move on to the bottom of the chart and look at your records of initial employment. So to verify that one student is a graduate and an employed graduate, we should have a transcript and the school's record of initial employment together to verify that data. Now, I would like to harken back a little bit to what Amaya mentioned for the third-party verification. If there are any records that the third party categorized as unable to be verified, verified as different, or verified as not correct, we ask the school to provide those actual records because it is an assessment of the school's process for collecting the information and maintaining verifiable records. So if the school relied upon information gathered from the graduate or the employer, which then couldn't be verified, that is not necessarily indicative that the process has broken down. It is indicative that the school relied upon information that ended up not being accurate information.
So the other block of documentation we'll be looking at on site are student files. So we'll look at current students, we'll look at graduate students, withdrawn students, leave of absence students on or returned from leave of absence, student achievement progress, transfer of credit. We'll basically look at an example of every type of student file. And so in each of those documents, we will request documentation of admissions documentation. And so that could look different for every school. That's something that when you're preparing for an on-site evaluation, review your admissions requirements and procedures. And I would suggest doing an audit of your own student files to ensure that you have documentation of each requirement that is disclosed in your catalog. And again, when you're communicating with your school, talk to your admissions representatives, let them know, talk to them, ensure what you're saying in the catalog is what you're actually doing in practice. For withdrawn students, we will ask for refund calculations. You will have to provide student ledgers as part of the withdrawn student files. Again, ensure that your school includes all of the columns that are in the template charts from Appendix B. We will most of the time we will only specifically select students that have a refund due to the student. And so if you delete that column, we won't know which students to actually select. Again, talk to your bursar and your financial aid director when you're preparing those files. And then for like student achievement progress, we'll look for documentation of advising sessions, review what you disclose in your catalog and your student handbook, and your policies on academic progress, and ensure that you have documentations, documentation of notifications, remediation, etc. Talk to your staff at your school that are responsible for that. It could be a joint effort, but student services usually maybe some instructors. Administrative and faculty files. Each on-site evaluation, we ask for all administrative and faculty files. So upon the start of the visit, we should have access to all of those files. I would say conducting a thorough review of these files prior to the on-site evaluation would be very helpful. The first step is sometimes what some of the documentation we require lives in different areas, different departments might have access to different documentation. So making sure that the team has one place that they're reviewing the files, that would require some additional preparation prior to the on-site evaluation. And then also consider if this documentation is online or on paper. So that could be something that maybe you're creating for us, or you're doing an audit of your paper files, ensuring that all of these documents are in each faculty or instructor files. Some examples would be the faculty personnel report or the administrative personnel report, academic background, signed code of conduct, at least for admissions representatives, professional development training, job descriptions, verification of prior work experience, documentation of onboarding, like training to teach, or proof of prior experience teaching, certifications if your state requires instructor licenses, making sure that they're in there and valid, and assessments or evaluations for faculty and staff.
Yeah, we are not looking for, sensitive information like tax documentation. That's not really what we're looking for personnel files. And so, this list is almost exactly what the team is going to be looking for. So if you do house those documents separately, it is helpful if you create like a flash drive, or if you have digital files that include these things, you can use these slides as kind of a guide for what to prepare and how to audit your faculty and personnel files.
And so I'm going to hand it back off to Maria to talk about when we're the on-site evaluation. We're here, the team is there.
Yes, this is the best part. So you started with the workshop, you filled out the application, you worked collaboratively on the SER. At the very least, you've prepped the people on campus to know what is in the SER, and now you've confirmed the visit dates, you've cleared the team, and the team is at your front door. So we are going to talk about what that actually looks like. We try very hard to be timely people, right? So the visit will start at around 9 a.m. We are, coming from other places in the country. We may not know where we're going. Please be forgiving if it is not exactly at 9 a.m. Maybe it's 9:05, but the team will arrive. A couple best practices here. One, please let the person who is responsible for opening the front door know who's coming and why. There have been times where we approach a beautiful glass door and there is another person on the other side of that beautiful glass door unwilling to open the door for us because they don't know why suits showed up in the reception area of the school. So please let everybody know that the team is actually coming. That should be a standard part of your preparation process. Before the team gets there, identify a team room. So the team room should have the paper files that you intend for them to review. There should be sufficient privacy. A couple best practices here. We want the team room to have sufficient soundproofing, right? We're talking about an area where the doors close, The walls go all the way up to the ceiling and all the way down to the floor. And that's because when the team is in a kind of deliberative space, we don't want anyone to pass by and take any of that conversation out of context, right? Our intention when we do an on-site evaluation is to leave the school whole. We don't want there to be a misunderstanding because that would jeopardize that ultimate aim. So please make sure that the room that is selected for the team has sufficient sound privacy. It may sound silly, but I encourage you to get 2 chairs, place them on either side of a wall, and see if you can talk to each other through the wall. And if you can, that's probably not the best place for the team. Please provide access to Wi-Fi so that the team can connect to the Wi-Fi and review, what you have digitally, review the student survey results. We'll review in our app that we use to collect those. Please make sure there's sufficient access to extension cords if there's not a tremendous amount of power options for the team, because we will be working largely with our electronic devices. Going back to the Wi-Fi, please make sure that there is the login credentials made available to the team. But if you have not done so already, please check with your IT administrator or your tech support to see if there's any kind of firewall or monitoring over that Wi-Fi. Amaya and I both do visits, but we are regularly communicating with other members of our team when they're doing visits. That's one of our consistency efforts. And so we want to make sure that there is a guarantee of confidentiality if we were going to be corresponding with one another. We don't want any of our communications to be monitored or caught up in any kind of firewall. So please check with your IT department before you get us hooked up to the Wi-Fi. Appendix B is downloadable on the forms and reports page of our website. Use it as a checklist. You'll notice that it's in 3 sections. The first one is the upload materials. That's the materials you're going to provide to the team ahead of the visit using the Dropbox link that you will receive in your application acknowledgement letter or other correspondence from the team, depending on the type of application you're receiving an on-site evaluation for. So you'll upload those materials. The second section is the team room materials. Those are the documents that you will include in the team room for the team to review. You do have the option, if you so choose, to upload the team room materials ahead of time, but please make those arrangements with the coordinator that is doing your visit or coordinating your visit so that they know to expect less in the team room. And then the third section of Appendix B is the Be Prepared to Provide section. That covers a lot of what Amaya mentioned in terms of what to include in the faculty files and the student files, graduation and employment information, and so on. If you are not sure what you need to provide to satisfy a certain item, reach out to the commission representative for clarification. We know that we all have our own nomenclature, and what we're asking for may not necessarily be immediately obvious to you. So make sure that you're reaching out and using us as a resource, as Amaya mentioned earlier. When the team makes it through the front door, please make sure there is someone to greet us there and show us to the team room. Once we get set up, hooked up to the Wi-Fi, we ask for a brief tour. This tour is not meant to be lengthy. It is not meant to eat into a lot of the review and interview time. It is meant to serve a couple of purposes. One, there's no ceiling tiles falling on students. We want to make sure. We will look at the tags, the inspection tags or the maintenance tags on your fire extinguishers. We'll see if the water that's coming out of your faucets is clear. So we're taking a look at the safety components of it. If you have kind of heavy trades programs and there's going to be safety equipment, like your students need hard hats or safety goggles or something like that in order to participate in training, please have those elements available to the team as well so that we are protected as we do the tour going through those areas. We're also going to be looking, if we know that safety equipment is required for your students, we're going to be looking to see if they're actually using it when they're participating in those didactic environments that may require it. So the tour is meant for all of that, but it is also the school's opportunity to tell the team where we can find certain individuals. So it is helpful to say, if the campus director is the one doing the tour, say, this is where you'll be able to find me for most of the day, or I'll be in my office, or I have meetings here, but you'll be able to find this person here and that person there. Generally speaking, a tour that exceeds like 20 minutes is going a little long. So if it is going a little bit long, just be prepared for the team leader to just give a gentle nudge and say, this is great. These are the following things we'd like to see. If we could just target those areas, and then we'll return to the team room to begin our work. If we have the occupation specialists with us on that tour, they will come with us, and then we will kind of drop them off at the area where they're going to be reviewing the training facilities and the equipment. So it would be helpful to let them know how to get back to the team room after they have completed that portion of the review. Okay, so I mentioned day one. Oh, good, we put typically in there. Thank you, Amaya. Typically starts at 9. And you know, a lot of times our on-site evaluators, particularly ones that have just joined us in the field in that way, ask for like a sample schedule. And we have tried for ages to come up with something that we thought was truly reflective of what most on-site evaluations were. And we came up short every time because every on-site evaluation is a unique experience. The documentation, the interviews, they lead teams in different directions. And so it's impossible to commit to what a visit would actually look like. Having said that, though, we do understand when there are limitations in people's access or ability to participate in the visit. You know, so if someone needs to leave early to pick their kids up from school, or if they have to take a parent to a doctor's appointment or something like that, make those arrangements with the team so that it's not interrupting, you know, the personal lives of your team and impacting their ability to meet their obligations, both to the school and outside of the school. But once we complete the tour, the team leader will do an entrance interview or kind of a introduction. At that point, you can let us know what scheduling restrictions may be. We will also establish a time for the education specialist to meet with the faculty, to do classroom observations, and to meet with students. And so we'll kind of set that up in the beginning so that you have a general idea of what that first day is going to look like. We will know ahead of time if we have to visit satellites or if there's other housing or if you have evening students. For initial applicants and for renewal applicants and any, you know, substantive change application that is adding or changing facilities or control, we have to visit all of the facilities for that school. And so we will make arrangements with you, if not done so ahead of time, to visit all of those additional facilities, the satellites, the housing. For day one, we will also try and overlap with your evening students for at least 45 minutes to an hour, just to see what the student experience is like for those evening students compared to what the student experience is like for the day students. So you can expect us on day one, if you have evening programs, to be there from about 9 a.m. to 6:30 or 7 p.m. If you don't have evening students, 6 is usually a pretty safe bet for wrapping up. At the end of day one, the team leader or the team together will provide kind of a debrief. So it's any items that the team asked for that we have not yet received, any outstanding items, meaning we need additional documentation to determine if the school demonstrated compliance with that particular standard. And that's to give the school an opportunity to pull the team together that evening or early the following morning to see if they can pull additional documentation to answer the team's questions. And, you know, it's also an opportunity to kind of think about things and then ask questions of the team or the commission representative the following morning, whether that's for clarification or anything like that. Did I miss anything on day one?
We won't visit externship sites. So if you have like a nursing program and the externship is at a hospital, we don't consider that an extension to the campus.
Exactly. Yes, thank you. On day two, we will be closer to 9 a.m. because this time we know where we are going. And day two is really an extension or a continuation of day one. It is reviewing updated documentation that the school may have been able to provide or pull together the night before or the morning before the team arrives there. It is wrapping up interviews if we have any follow-up questions or maybe someone was unavailable for interviews on day one. So like I said, it's really a continuation. I will say, the team tries to batch documentation requests so that it's not overly burdensome administratively on the school. But if there are a ton of documents that we've asked for them a couple times and still didn't get them on day one, the team leader is likely to communicate a cutoff point for day two. Generally, that's around 11, somewhere between 11 and 12. But it's going to vary by school and what the team is still hoping the school can produce for their review. Once the visit has come to kind of its natural conclusion, everything's been reviewed, the questions have been answered or not answered, the experience will will be completed with a summary review. This is kind of a verbal debrief of what the team found, of any observations they had. It's also the team's opportunity to acknowledge any kind of laudatory behaviors or provide compliments. For example, if a bunch of students have shouted out a faculty member for being super supportive, really engaging, we use the summary review to really highlight that person and the relationship they have with the students. It is also the team's first attempt at putting together what could be findings in the final report. It is verbal, it cannot be recorded, and it is a courtesy. It is not an opportunity to relitigate some of the issues that were explored with the team and the school during the on-site evaluation. It is a verbal retelling so that if the school needs to engage in some remediation efforts to fix some things, pull together better documentation, really firm up some policies and procedures, the school then does not have to wait for the on-site evaluation report before they engage in those efforts. It is I encourage you, and I imagine I have Amaya's backup on this. If there is work to be done, start the work then. Do not wait for the report, because once you get the report, you're going to have 30 days to turn around a response. 30 days, in most cases, is not enough time to implement a new process and then demonstrate implementation of that process through documentation. It's also not enough time to show that the implementation has been ongoing. You just will not be able to produce sufficient documentation within 30 days. So the summary review is kind of our heads up for you. As I mentioned, it cannot be recorded. And we always know when it's going to be recorded. We know when someone's putting an iPhone or voice memo on their knee. We know when someone has a computer up and they're running, Gemini or, Zoom AI notes or something like that. If the team suspects that there's any recording whatsoever, the summary review will come to an abrupt halt and the team will vacate the school. Having said that, the conversation with the commission representative, if there's anything that needs clarification, it is not over. So if you have questions about what was discussed at the summary review, scheduling a follow-up call with your commission representative is going to be a best practice, as opposed to trying to tackle those kind of difficult questions when the team has completed the review. Okay, so these are best practices. These are tips and tricks. ACCSC, well, staff do not tell you how to prepare for a visit. We just tell you to prepare for a visit. But having done as many visits as we have done, not just me and Amaya, but the other members of our team, Tasha included, this was kind of when we said, what are some tips and tricks you'd like us to communicate to the workshop participants? This is kind of what came back. So please make sure that in preparation for the visit, use Appendix B as that checklist. Any commission letters where an action has been forwarded to the on-site evaluation team, like an outcomes report or a PAC report, as Amaya mentioned earlier, use that as a checklist as well, and make sure that all of the documentation is provided. I will tell you, and I'm actually not joking, people will pick up the phone and call each other to talk about how excited they are that files are organized. If we can make it through the backup documentation for student achievement because it's organized perfectly by cohort and the transcripts are where they need to be, the records of initial employment are completely filled out, we celebrate that and celebrate with each other. So how you organize your documents is completely up to you. These are just some best practices based off of what we've seen in the field. If you are a digital record-keeping school, stay a digital record-keeping school. With the exception of a couple things that we ask you to print out, like the G&E chart, maybe an org chart, some class schedules. If everything is digital, it can stay digital. Our only ask, though, is figuring out a good way to organize those digital documents. So, for example, a way to do student achievement backup documentation in the digital space would be potentially pulling together a flash drive with files for each cohort so that it's clear what we're looking at when we look in those files. Likewise, for student files, when we're looking at the admissions documentation and we're looking at academic advising and the financial aid, those may be housed separately in your student information system or in different departments. It is helpful if you pull the digital documents that we need and compile a digital file either on a flash drive or the school's own laptop. We can review it that way. Please do not give us access to your student information system. That would make me personally panic because I'd worry I'd just delete everything. So find a way for us to review it in a way that is not impactful for your systems. Please do not use, again, we can't tell you you can't, but if you are going to print out those paper pieces, please don't use a plastic sleeve just because sometimes it's difficult to get things out. And then it's easy to miss things when they're all in a plastic sleeve like that. We use a lot of ACCSC specific jargon like SER and PAC and outcomes. It is okay to ask us during an interview, if you don't know what that means, but it may be helpful in your kind of interview prep with your staff to define some of that nomenclature for them. Please know that for renewal schools, we give you your Dropbox link in your application acknowledgement letters, which are sent out before the SER. You can start uploading Appendix B materials as soon as you get that letter, especially if those materials are unlikely to change, right? If your insurance binder is going to be valid between when you get that letter and when you're receiving the on-site evaluation, you can start to upload that. But please be mindful that we are looking for those uploads to begin minimally 2 weeks ahead of the visit. It is administratively difficult for schools when they wait until the last minute to start uploading those documents. And though we love Dropbox, there are some limitations in terms of the file size hitting. If you are doing all of the uploading the night before, it is possible that all of those documents, because of the sheer amount of information and data that's being uploaded, won't hit the team's Dropbox until like noon the next day. So be mindful of timeline, give technology the time to work. If there's anything specific about your school, like it's maybe an urban environment where parking is difficult, or there's going to be construction on the parking lot or anything like that, please communicate that to the team in advance so that we can make adjustments on where we're parking, how we're going to get to your campus, anything like that. Also, we require part of our process requires getting student feedback through our student survey mechanism, and that's digital. Please be wary or mindful of survey fatigue. We can always tell when a student population is over surveyed because we send out that survey link and we get much less than 25%. So if you know you're getting a visit, take a look at what your student satisfaction survey timeline is and make adjustments so that there is sufficient time between surveys and it won't jeopardize our ROI on that. One of the requirements is that the school gives consideration to PAC input. So that's the input that they got from the review of the program advisory committee. How the school intends to document that is completely up to the school, but some best practices I think that we've seen is, strategic planning meetings where there are minutes taken and there is evidence that the PAC's input was discussed at those kind of leadership or strategic planning meetings. So be mindful of what it looks like for you and how you're documenting what you're doing with the information that you're gleaning from those PAC meeting minutes. And then also, I mentioned before, be wary of the aspirational SER. Be mindful that ACCSC is there to review how the school is actually operating. And it is better to say, we didn't get it right, but we figured out we weren't getting it right. And these are the changes that we implemented. And here's evidence. And here's how we're going to sustain that to the team, as opposed to, oh yeah, everything's fine. That is not nearly as compelling because a grant of initial accreditation or a grant of renewal of accreditation is an expression of trust, right? It is, we trust that you are in compliance with standards such that you can sustain that compliance over a grant of initial or renewal of accreditation. So be mindful also along that same vein that I don't know is a perfectly good answer to a question. It is much better to say, I'm not the best resource for you for that question, but I know who is. I will follow up and I will let you know, or I'll ask that person to come talk to you. Because if we get information that is not accurate, it could send the team on a rabbit hole that they never needed to go down if someone had just said, I don't know the answer to that question. So as you're preparing your team, just let them know that I don't know is a-okay, as long as the conversation is not over and the team can collaborate with the school to get those questions answered. Okay, so the role of the on-site evaluation team is fact-finding, and that's it. The team is there to observe and report back to the board. The team is not there to make any determinations or to propose an action to the board. So when you get an on-site evaluation report, you'll see the team's observations in narrative form, and you'll see the team's findings. The team's findings are not the team found, or the team believes, or the school is not compliant. No, they are written as the school did not demonstrate, right? And that is because of what was available to the team during the on-site evaluation, either through interviews or survey collection or observations or the documentation that was provided. Please know that each member of the team completes an evaluation form, and then those forms are synthesized by the staff into the on-site evaluation report. All right, so everyone's favorite topic. We've talked about how to prepare for a renewal, some best practices for documentation, how to prepare for visits for initials. ACCSC has a provision in the rules that ACCSC conducts unannounced on-site evaluations. I like that graphic though. An unannounced on-site evaluation, generally speaking, is a staff person. And that staff person has a letter signed by Dr. McComas and will come in and introduce themselves and say, hi, you've been selected for an unannounced on-site evaluation. Here's the letter that links to the school. Here's who I am, or I'm sorry, that links to the rule that allows that. Here's who I am. And then on the second page or on the back of that letter is a list of things to provide. So we thought, since you're all here, we would tell you exactly what it is to provide. That you would need to provide for an on-site evaluation. So when the staff person walks in, take a deep breath, contact the school director, let them know that ACCSC is here for an unannounced on-site evaluation, and we will patiently wait until that person can, meet with us. We understand, we will arrive generally around 10 a.m. Sometimes that's when there's meetings. We will happily sit in the lobby and wait. We don't want to be super disruptive. So once that person, the campus director, or someone that is a senior administrator on campus is available, please ask them to come get us, and we will find somewhere to conduct the on-site evaluation. Please consider, if we were to show up for an unannounced on-site evaluation, where would you put us? We don't want to kick anyone out of their office. We can be flexible as long as it's not like a broom closet with bleach fumes. That would not be great. But please be mindful of, okay, if this were to happen, where would we put them? Couple things. Years and years and years ago, we used to joke about schools that had their unannounced on-site evaluation binder. I imagine some schools still have their unannounced on-site evaluation binder. But in the digital space, it may look different. So we wanted to provide this for you in terms of how to remain prepared. The staff person will come on site and review the backup documentation for your most recently submitted annual report. So every year when you prepare the annual report, if you go through the practice of making sure the transcripts and the records of initial employment are organized somewhere, specifically on SharePoint or maybe on a flash drive, or maybe you do keep paper records, if it is all organized and tied to the annual report and that is part of your practice every year, then A, you are prepared with that information for an unannounced on-site evaluation, but B, you've also set up a process that will keep you ready when you go through a renewal of accreditation process. Please keep a printed enrollment agreement on hand when likewise a printed and bound catalog with any relevant addenda. The ACCSC staff person is going to sit down with our checklists, the enrollment agreement checklist and the catalog checklist, and your enrollment agreement and your catalog, and we're going to cross-reference it and make sure that all of those items are there. As a reminder, there is a requirement that the school can produce a printed and bound catalog upon request, so I would encourage you all to just keep one handy every time you revise or republish the catalog. We encourage you to keep a file folder, digital or print, whatever works best for how you have your record keeping system set up, specific to PAC, somewhere where you keep your minutes, somewhere where you keep your sign in or attendance sheets, and then documentation of upcoming minutes, because this is something that we will ask for. Keep an organizational chart that includes the names of staff who fill each role and update that org chart as necessary. When we do the unannounced on-site evaluation, we will ask for that org chart to be printed out so that we know who we're talking to, or if we have questions about, admissions, we know who we need to talk to, what that person's name is for admissions. Also, please be prepared to provide student population numbers by program and by schedule. And I encourage you to keep a centralized location for all of your advertising. So whether that's, somewhere in the Google Drive where you have links to all of the social media, or if you have proofs for other marketing initiatives like banner ads or a billboard or something like that. If you, part of your marketing strategy is TV commercials or radio ads or anything like that, have a centralized spot for all of those URLs and for the scripts and maybe recordings of some of those marketing materials. I also encourage you, kind of as a final best practice, to regularly audit your unannounced documentation. If this is something that you all commit to, then preparing for other types of visits, the work has already started there. So regularly audit your documentation, your student achievement documentation, your PAC documentation, make sure your org chart regularly stays up to date, and so on. Okay, so we have talked a lot about on-site evaluations. Renewal, initial, subchange, and unannounced. Michelle, do we have any questions that Amaya and I can answer?
We do. We have a couple of questions that kind of cover the entire 2 days of an on-site evaluation. So you all discussed interviews. Will those only be for admissions directors, or will staff and managers also be interviewed?
The team can interview anyone they need to get answers to their questions.
And speaking of occupation specialists, can a person serve as an occupation specialist multiple times for the same school/program, multiple site visits?
Sure, of course they can, as long as throughout the tenure, or for as long as they're doing those visits, they have remained truly independent and unaffiliated with the school.
And going back to codes of conduct, are all employees, faculty, and administration required to sign a code of conduct, or are only the ones involved in admissions?
I think technically in our standards, only admissions representatives are required to have signed code of conducts, but I would consider, I would ask yourselves why you would only require admissions representatives to have a documented signed code of conduct in your personnel files.
Thank you. Can a copy of the catalog be in a binder, or does it have to have binding glue or combs to be considered correctly binded? And are printed enrollment agreements in a catalog required, or can they just provide digital copies?
For the unannounced? Well, printed, it says printed and bound. Yeah. Printed and bound, as long as it is printed and bound somehow, generally that meets the standard.
Including in a binder.
Including in a binder, Dr. McComas says. And then for the enrollment agreement, it does not necessarily have to be printed out unless it is part of the school's process to print out an enrollment agreement. I will say one of the pitfalls that we have here is sometimes the schools will have like a remote admissions or enrollment process, right? Where it's one continuous enrollment agreement and then they print it and it's not paginated. So if it is the school's process to print out executed enrollment agreements and keep them, as a file, a backup paper file, make sure that printed enrollment agreement still has all of the items required on the checklist.
And then that's part of student file review, but for the team room materials, we do ask for 3 printed enrollment agreement in templates.
Right, and last 2 questions before we shift to our next topic. For schools who are going through the renewal process, when should they expect to receive their on-site evaluation dates?
So generally speaking, schools going through renewal, they submit the application 45 days after the workshop. Those applications are processed and you get the application acknowledgement letter before minimally 30 days before the SER is due. Once those letters go out, that is when the staff people do the outreach to schedule visits, so that you already have your visit dates before you're submitting the SER. Generally speaking, those visits are going to happen between 30 and 90 days after this SER due date. Asking for an extension does not necessarily change when the school can expect to receive an on-site evaluation. So if you're going through a renewal and your SER is due September of 25th, then you can expect a visit starting October 25th. If there are any limitations for scheduling, like this school closes for a winter break, please communicate that with the staff person that is listed in your application acknowledgement letter so they can take that into consideration when proposing dates.
Okay, and last question before we shift over, because that was a hot topic at the end. How are schools selected for an unannounced on-site evaluation?
It is random. That's all I got.
And can I add one thing? Turn on my video. Okay. Yeah, so I would just add one thing that you all taught. Great job, both Amaya and Maria. Fantastic information. There's one step in the process about when you get the notice of the staff is proposing to be on the onset evaluation. I've received some requests from individual institutions, with various different kinds of questions about whether or not someone could be removed from that. And so generally, there has to be an actual conflict of interest that is present to exclude somebody from an on-site evaluation. So the fact that a team member, a team leader, or even an education specialist may be coming from another institution outside of the locality geographically, but maybe their institution offers the same or similar kind of program. That's not a conflict of interest. A conflict of interest is more along the lines of that team leader has expressed knowledge or a relationship or some kind of monetary or remunerative relationship with the school that's otherwise unknown, and they would have to disclose that, and that would exclude them. But similarity in program offerings, a lot of times can be very useful because that individual has experience in that particular area. And team members are themselves bound to a code of conduct. Are to treat all school materials confidentially anyway. So, it's just something that I wanted to bring up. I've received a couple questions along those lines and have had to, kind of really bore down on the question of what is the actual conflict of interest that we're referring to. But yeah, great job, ladies.
Thank you. One more thing about the unannounced. It is unlikely that if the school has a pending or recently approved substantive change application that would require an on-site evaluation, that school would then also receive an unannounced on-site evaluation, but otherwise it is random.
Yeah, it is random, and just, it's not, it's random, but it's also within a window, right? So if you just had an on-site evaluation for some other reason, then it's unlikely that you'd be selected for an unannounced visit as well. There are also unannounced visits that the commission might direct and just say, that's not random, that is specific. And there's a reason that somebody is showing up on the institution's doorstep. And so certainly you want to avoid those circumstances as well. But just the completely random, we're trying to do between 5 and 10% a year. We think it's the best practice. We've been doing them for years. Like to just let folks know that just stay calm and carry on. It's a normal day. It may not feel normal, but we'd like to keep it as much that way as we can.